Okay, guys, this is going to be a really quick video on George Washington's presidency. Since some of you were out, you missed this lesson and you missed this foldable. So at any moment, what you want to do is go ahead and pause and make sure that you're writing in the notes. So if you have your paper out flat, you're going to go ahead and fold in the edges. And this is going to give you the different issues that occurred under the presidency of George Washington. Now, as Washington is becoming president in 1789, what is the number one issue that he's going to face? It should be the national debt that was occurred during the American Revolution. So we owe a lot of money. So what Washington is going to do is he's going to look to his cabinet. What's a cabinet? It was the group of advisors that gave the president advice. So one person that is in his cabinet is going to be Alexander Hamilton. He will be Secretary of Treasury. So Alexander Hamilton is going to tell the president that we're going to come up with a plan to get us out of debt. And this is going to be called Hamilton's Financial or Economic Plan. So let's go ahead and open it up. If we were to look at this economic plan, it is a four-part plan to get the nation out of debt, money that was owed. The first thing that Alexander Hamilton says is that we needed to repay the debt. Whether we owed other countries or whether we owed the states, we needed to repay all of the national debt. This would acquire trust because remember, if someone doesn't ever pay you back the money that they owe you and they ask you for money again, you're not going to trust them to pay you back. So we needed to incur trust. Number one, repay the debt. Number two, we needed to create a national bank. Now, where were we gonna put all of the money that we collected? We had to have one centralized bank, but there's going to be a problem with the creation of the national bank. Alexander Hamilton is going to say that it was a necessary and proper thing to do, even though it was not written in the Constitution. His opponent, of course, who is Thomas Jefferson, is going to say, no, if it's not written in the Constitution, then we cannot do it. And these are the two terms in which we call a loose constructionist, someone that says, even though it's not written, we can still do it in the Constitution, and a strict constructionist, someone that says, if it's not written, we should not do it. And this is going to be the main reason that we are going to see political parties start. The reason the political parties start is because of the creation of the national bank, that debate going between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. And they're going to eventually form their two political parties. Now, where are we going to get the money to put inside the national bank? It's going to come from that whiskey tax. Who's growing all the wheat? The South is. And with all that extra wheat they have left over, they start making whiskey. And it's very cheap to make and it's very profitable because a lot of people end up buying it. It becomes very popular. So Alexander Hamilton says, let's go ahead and tax the whiskey and raise some money to pay off that debt. What's the next thing they're going to do? A protective tariff. What is a protective tariff? It's basically a tax on imported goods. Anything coming into the United States is going to have a tax. And of course, the South isn't going to be very happy about this. Why? Because they import a lot of things from other countries, especially Great Britain. The northern people, of course, they don't really care because they're manufacturing and they're doing industrial things. They're making their own things. So that finishes out the four-part plan of Alexander Hamilton. If we're looking at the emergence of political parties are going to arise. For what reason? Again, because of the discussions and the debates over the national bank. So the two first political parties will be the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republican Party. The F in the Federalist Party will stand for fancy. These are the people that were fancy, they were rich, they were educated, such as Alexander Hamilton and John Adams. They believed in a strong national government. The national government should hold most of the power, and these people, since they're rich and educated, they should make most of the decisions. When we're looking at the Constitution, they're going to say, just because it doesn't say it, doesn't mean we can't do it. And that's a loose interpretation of the Constitution, known as a loose constructionist. And most of the Federalist Party are going to be from those northern states. On contrary, we're going to have the Democratic Republican Party. They're going to be made up of common people, or mostly farmers, such as Thomas Jefferson and, of course, James Madison. They're going to be all about state rights, and they're going to believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. In other words, if the Constitution doesn't say it word by word, then we cannot do it. They are also going to be from the southern states. So you definitely want to write in here southern states. I didn't get to write it in. Let's go ahead and go to the next part, Jay's and Pinckney's Treaty. These are going to be two treaties that are signed under the presidency of George Washington. What is Jay's treaty all about? It's basically between the United States and England, or Great Britain. They wanted to remove British soldiers from that Northwest Territory. Even though the war had been over, some of the soldiers never left that Northwest Territory, and so we wanted them out. So under the treaty, they're going to ask them to move. Also, this is going to allow the U.S. to take on trade into the Caribbean. During this time, Great Britain obviously has the power over this area, and they're going to allow the U.S. to go ahead and trade with the Caribbean. Pinckney's treaty is going to be between the United States and Spain, and it basically just allowed the U.S. to use the Mississippi River because during this time, Spain had control of the Mississippi River. So we're going to use it to trade all the way down to New Orleans. Now remember that whiskey tax under Hamilton's economic plan. We're going to have a little bit of a rebellion here, which is known as the Whiskey Rebellion or Shays Rebellion 2.0. So what was it all about? It was basically a revolt led by Pennsylvania farmers. They attacked tax collectors the same way we had attacked those stamp tax collectors during the American Revolution with that tar and feather tactic. The same thing's going to happen here in Pennsylvania with these farmers and these tax collectors. What was the cause of the Whiskey Rebellion? It's going to be that tax on whiskey. What ends up happening? Washington hears about this revolt going on. He riles up the army, gets on his horse along with Alexander Hamilton, and they make their way down there to Pennsylvania, correct? Once Pennsylvania gets word that Washington is on his way with his army, they all scramble. Everybody goes everywhere. And by the time they get there, there was no more revolt. What did this prove? Basically that now we had a strong national government. Unlike Shays Rebellion, when we were under the Articles of Confederation where the national government was weak, this was the opposite. It was strong, and people were now going to listen to what the executive branch did. Now, we know that the French are going through their French Revolution, and eventually they're going to declare war on Great Britain. And of course, they're going to ask us for help. And what is Washington going to say? He is going to issue what is called the Proclamation of Neutrality. Basically, avoid getting involved in any European conflicts, whether it be Great Britain, whether it be France, we need to stay away from it. Avoid taking sides. Because if we were to take sides, it was going to cause some sort of conflict, especially along trade. Because we were trading with both countries, if we were to take a side, obviously the other country wasn't going to like us. So we wanted to avoid taking sides and remain neutral at all times. And so Washington is going to serve 2 terms as president, and every single president after him, except for FDR, will serve 2 terms as well until it becomes the 22nd Amendment. This is one of the presidents that Washington does. But before Washington leaves office, I'm a firm believer that Benjamin Franklin created a time machine. Washington got in that time machine and went fast forward into the future and witnessed everything that was going to go on in the United States. He comes back to 1792 and writes a speech saying, do not do any of these things. They were kind of like warnings to the United States in what to do in the future. Number 1, what does he say in his farewell address? No political parties. Do not associate yourself with political parties. Why? Because they're going to divide the United States. Do we have political parties today? Yes. Are we divided? Yes. Number 2, do not form any permanent alliances with any foreign countries. In other words, keep to yourself, mind your own business. Don't go off signing treaties with European countries or any foreign countries for 20, 30, 40 plus years. And then the last thing, you want to avoid sectionalism. What is sectionalism? Basically being more loyal to a certain section of the United States. In other words, he's telling the North and the South, you guys need to get along or there's going to be big problems. And do big problems erupt? Yes. Eventually this will lead us into the Civil War. So everything that Washington warned us about, we basically didn't listen and we went on and did it. And it did cause a lot of conflicts along the way. The last thing that you want to cover in the Washington's presidency is going to be that Judiciary Act. Very simple. In 1789, when Washington becomes president, he signs into effect the Judiciary Act, which basically set up the court system. If you think about the J in judiciary, it stands for judge, for jail, for justice. It's basically our court system. So make sure that you have all of your notes by Monday.